Good morning, afternoon, evening, whatever it is, whenever you finally get a chance to check this out. But if you have followed all the directions by email, you should be looking at this video in a Canvas course that has been designated for you called the ERPL Facilitator Canvas course that Mike has invited you to. So that's great if you're here. And also in this Canvas course, there should be three attachments. The three attachments are two PowerPoints and one Word document. The PowerPoints are titled September 1st Facilitators Training, and another one's called September 1st Participant Training. Participant PowerPoint. You can see that on the bottom of the screen here. I am going to be using these PowerPoints today to guide us through the facilitation of the September 1st session that you will be facilitating for me. And I'm, again, very appreciative of it. And thank you very much for doing this. I think you'll find this to be a rewarding experience. Ultimately, when the year is said and done, that this will be really pretty cool for you. Why I have two PowerPoints is one is I'm going to use during this session, and it's only for this session. It's the one called the Facilitator Training. I'm going to click through it, and there's a number of slides that are specifically used only in this PowerPoint, and it wouldn't be used in the participant PowerPoint unless you decided you'd like to use them. I'll give you that creative license. If you see a slide that's in this one that I'm using for your training that you'd also like to include, then you can definitely add it in there. And then there's, of course, some duplicate slides that I will be coaching you through how you facilitate a particular section. So what I'm going to do is use this facilitator PowerPoint and kind of zip through it, but then I will walk you through what the participant PowerPoint looks like, the one that you would actually fire up on September 1st with your room full of participants. The other document that is attached to the Canvas course that you should download is this Facilitator's Guide to Secondary Science ERPL Setup. That's basically what it is. September 1st is going to be totally dedicated to preparing our groups for the 4 future ERPLs and setting up some goals. So this document should be downloaded and ideally in front of you as you go through this course with me. And so let's go ahead and get started in this facilitation, this training. Here we go. This is the one I want, and I'm going to fire this one up here. And that's just the front screen. Isn't it nice? You've seen it before. I'm going to go over an overview and of what to expect that day. So September 1st, if you recall, I've booked Paige Keeley to take over our morning and give us training. I don't believe I mentioned during pre-planning, but I should have. She's definitely going over how to use the science probes and formative assessments within the stages of the 5E instructional model. I know I mentioned she's, of course, coming to talk about her science probes and formative assessment classroom techniques, but she's also going to correlate them to the stages of the 5E instructional model, which I thought would be really great to kind of plant some seeds before we get into the breakout sessions. But you can see here on the agenda, 8 a.m. to 11:30, that's with Paige Keeley. I pretty much am thinking a solid 3 hours with her, and she can easily do a full day and keep a crowd entertained and busy. So this is going to, while it might look like a long time to be in an auditorium with her, she will be having us do things and think. It'll be pretty fun. I can't wait to see her do that. But the 11:30 to 12:30 1 hour lunch break, and then when we get back at 12:30 to 3 o'clock, that is you. You'll see we only have 2.5 hours for you to facilitate. So there's quite a bit to accomplish during the 2.5 hours. But each group will work in a different pace, and I'm ready for groups to zip right along through the process and some groups to be blocked or kind of not stumped, but basically challenged by one or two of the steps that are in the process to set up. And if that's okay, then the next session, the next ERPL would continue on. And so let's keep going through this overview. And just a little reminder, I showed this slide during pre-planning, but the half day with Paige Keeley, the next half of the day was really about goal setting. And then I know I'm putting my own face in the way here, but the ERPL. maybe it should blend. The blender, no, the ERPL um, place on Canvas is going to be a place where we start to utilize on this day. On September 1st, this will be a place that many people are starting to get used to the Canvas course PLC's resource, but not clicking on this. And what are these ERPL West groups, ERPL East groups? This is the day we're going to actually start using them and clicking in them, and it will be a good thing. So again, another familiar um, thing I created for the pre-planning, just to kind of visualize pre-planning. Then September 1st, half of the day is formative assessment. The next half of the day is for our ERPL preparation and standard selection, which a lot of groups were starting to think there's already thinking about what science standard they would like to focus on in their content area that would be worthy of some time to spend in. And that's good because it'll make this process happen a lot faster for you in that set and during your session. ERPLs are during October, November, January, and February. And of course, there's an East session and a West session. The East locations are at New Smyrna Beach High School. The West locations are at University High School. I don't have room numbers and assignments yet. I probably won't by next Wednesday when I see you face to face, or you join us via webinar for any questions and answers you have about this training. But basically that's kind of what to expect, separated by uh, a month or two in between each ERPL session. And my expectations aren't necessarily any work done in the interim. If they only do this stuff together when they're together for those 90 minutes, that's fine. But I'm really hoping this encourages some collaboration outside of the time. And we now have a platform in Canvas to have this electronic collaboration to be just kind of an automatic process, no matter where the people in your group are from. They might be from other schools, and you can still do this collaboration. Just a reminder that this process is basically considered a cycle. I'm calling it a continuous improvement cycle rather than giving it the name lesson study, because it is mimicking much of lesson study, but not enough of it to call it lesson study. I am a true believer in the process of lesson study, but I also believe in the integrity of the whole process. So it is not lesson study, but we are mimicking and kind of duplicating the best parts of it that I can. And unfortunately, we won't have the built-in classroom observation and watching students learn a lesson that has been created by a group. But this will basically be all the good parts together in collaboration. So I don't mean for this to be something to bog us down right now, but just kind of see how every ERPL we get back together on a Wednesday, and we would encourage the revisiting of group norms that'll be developed on September 1st. And they'll be constantly in the unit development, research lesson building together as a small team. But let's go ahead and let me show you. This will be a slide that's in the participant slide, and of course it's the large group norms. I didn't want you to have to facilitate a large group norm creation, because I found those when you got a group of, whether it be a group of 5 or a group of 20 people, this can take some time. It is a worthy process, but we're going to do this again in a smaller groups in your room. And so what I'd like you to do is set the stage, saying, all right, today's, after your welcome, and you'll see in the other PowerPoint, after a welcome and a quick run through of the agenda and some goals, that you would facilitate large groups. This isn't really facilitation, just notify them. Today we have a lot of work to do in only 2.5 hours. So please, it would be very appreciative if you're totally present today. No texting or answering emails, and no sidebar discussions. If you have an emergency, of course, no problem. Go ahead and leave the room if you've got to deal with something. It's absolutely no problem with that. But while we're here, be present with each other so we can get these tasks accomplished. The second two, or the next two, are, of course, be respectful of the knowledge of others. Everybody's a contributor in these groups, no matter how much teaching experience. I've found in lesson study groups, the more veteran teachers can learn as much, sometimes even more, from our newest teachers for multiple reasons. So it's really great to be open-minded for everyone's contribution to discussions in this process. So that's something that you can kind of convey to the large group, and then be willing to communicate honestly and openly. That way, if there are any issues or something that can be dealt with rather than buried, and just kind of move on. Um, this will be an ongoing theme. They will see this slide, and this is something I want you to know and embrace as well, and that is that the process we're about to go through isn't about only generating a product. While we'll be utilizing the Canvas ERPL area to post ideas and things and resources within our group, I'm not auditing these things to see did they create something and how good it is or whatever. But I mean, heck, I'm going to really be excited that if they are creating something, that we have something good to share with others. But this is about the process. It isn't just the product. The product is going to be a nice byproduct of the process, but it is the experience and the journey through this. And in a typical lesson study group, I have facilitated three. We typically meet 3 times in 6-hour days, but the first 2 are basically the creation process, the research in between and development of the unit of instruction along with the research lesson. And then the last day is the teach day, which is a huge learning day. But it is every person I've facilitated through the over 100 and some teachers. They've talked more about the process, and their product was their product. They actually learned some of the things they'd worked with and thought would work with the students didn't work. They were surprised on some of the things that they were really proud of that they researched and found out it did work in the classroom. But the fact of the matter is, this is about the process and the work together. So I will have said this before. You can reiterate that it came from me, or if you want to own it, but you really get out of this process what you put into it. So it's really important to be a contributing member to your group, and it will be rewarding, even though these Wednesdays that are coming up are the end of a long day, and so it's really only a 90-minute time to get together. But those 90 minutes can be very productive. All right, so this is part of your slides in this training. I don't have this as part of the participant one. You're more than welcome to add it if you are comfortable with talking about this, but I wanted you to be knowledgeable in why I've selected this format to deliver this process out to the masses of science teachers. One, they challenged me basically to figure out something that is meaningful for everybody in science, and 2, it needs to be able to hit the theme or the goal this year to help all learners in the classroom, and that's never been something we've abandoned. Of course, we're always concerned about all the types of learners in the classroom. So these, if we've all had training before, and there's a reason and a rhyme and a reason why we have certain types of training. It's not this is better than that, but this is different than that. So traditional professional development, as you can see, the bullet points on the left begins with an answer driven by an outside expert. Communication flow is often a trainer to the teachers. Because of that, there's a hierarchical relationship between a trainer and the learner. Like, oh, they know more than me, so please feed me and dump all this knowledge in my brain too. And then the research informs the practice. So there's definitely many valuable training experiences I've had that have fit this format, and I've been able to make this application in my own classroom and make it work. In lesson study, this is what we're mimicking now. It begins with questions, and it's driven by the participants. The communication flows among each other, the teachers, and because of that, there's a reciprocal relationship among the learners. And the practice itself is research. So we are science teachers, so we can appreciate research. It is part of what is the fundamentals of what we teach, students about how our world increases in knowledge and what we do in the world of science for research. Well, we're scientists as well in the science of teaching science, and we're going to be doing some research. I wanted to give like an example. You might remember when we had the gradual release model, where we were basically learning in a traditional PD fashion information that was by experts, and they started off with the answer is the gradual release model. If we did the I do, then we do, then you do it alone kind of model, which had some sort of uh, some different versions of come out recently. But that is an example of a traditional PD model that we followed, and it works, and it's interesting. But there's a hierarchical approach, and while some of those, that's just an example. But let me expand upon the. If you noticed, I put a couple bullet points under the lesson study side, and begins with questions. So, for instance, this particular one we're going to, I'm going to expand it here. Begins with questions. How can we help students conceptually understand this standard? Each group, and I don't mean room, I mean groups within a room are going to select a science standard that they would like to dive into. So they could ask this question: how can we help students conceptually understand this standard? How can I develop a 5E, or should be we, how can we develop a 5E unit that includes the science standard that they've selected? How can we effectively use formative assessment probes to inform science instruction and promote learning for all students? These are examples of a question you may ask to get started in your development of your research. It's not unusual to take on more than one of these within a time period, but the time period we have, it's probably best that teachers kind of start thinking about a focus, how to build more knowledge in that science standard that they've selected, and how best to apply it. And then, of course, I'm promoting and hoping that participants would like to dive into the 5E instructional model and learn more about that, or refresh themselves. But this is a process driven by participants, communication flow among teachers. There'll be reciprocal relationships, meaning not necessarily is there a hierarchy in the group. Sometimes we have perceived hierarchies because someone's taught longer, or someone does have content expertise in a particular science standard, but there's a lot of expertise to be shared. Maybe someone's an expert at a certain classroom management technique. Maybe someone's an expert at utilizing some form of technology or technology in instruction, and not necessarily about the content, but about some applications in the classroom. So there's a lot of expertise to go around. This might sound like I put on here, a highly effective PLC. It is. Those of you who have run PLCs, have PLC training, really what we're talking about, what lesson study actually is a highly effective PLC with a couple other processes embedded within it to get your mind thinking in other ways. And we'll dive into that in a minute. What has worked in the past is, and this might be something I don't have in the participant PowerPoint, but you might use it. You may or may not, or clean it up. It's not the best looking one. But what's worked in the past, of course, is that everyone walks into the group with open mind, respect and trust, focus on the students. Can't go wrong if you do that. And then there's specific job roles within the group. And because your room is a large group that'll break up into small groups, and I don't know the size of the groups that'll ultimately form, I can tell you my experience has been groups of 4 to 6 are really ideal. Anything bigger than that becomes a little bit of a challenge as far as the whole group, every person feeling like they have a say. There's not so many people in the group, but you're going to let it happen. It's just going to happen naturally on what standards get selected. And if you end up getting a large group, it's okay. We can make it work. But that, I'm just kind of giving you the experience. And then the job roles, it's a little easier to assign job roles if there's that many groups or that many people within a group. So the roles that I have always suggested: facilitator, you're the facilitator of the room and of this process, but within in one group, one subgroup, the facilitator is going to be the person who says this as much as they can. And this is the part of lesson study that's really important, to always think of everything they're talking about through the lens and the eyes of the student. So that person takes on a role saying, well, how would the students react to, or what would the students think about this? Or, if they're talking about a process or resource, or how would they read this? Think of the stumbling blocks that a student might have in something you're developing. And think of all students too. Have that lens of the English as a second language student, the ESE student, the extremely brilliant and gifted and talented student sitting in the room. Thinking of that and how to make this process meaningful for all. Hence the 5E approach, where there's access points for everybody and challenges for everybody if you do it right. And it's not the easiest thing in the world. A note taker, I always say everyone because it's one of those times where everyone's talking and someone just said something brilliant and what did they say? And if you had a tape recorder going or something, you could get it. But if everyone's kind of jotting down things that are being said, somebody might have captured that little gem of wisdom that happens from time to time when you basically work with other teachers. Recorder, someone to put in officially into our Canvas site that's created for the ERPL group, and that would be where today we're on the September 1st. The first entries are going to be happening, and then the timekeeper kind of help the small group because when you get jamming in work, you lose track of time, and if you're running out of time and you want to honor the time and not stay long, start on time and end on time. But if the group decided for some reason to stick around a little longer, but the timekeeper would be the person who go, hey, we've got 15 minutes left, wrap it up. This is something I'm showing you. This is not in their slide. Giving you two examples. So a middle school example and a high school example. So here's the middle school. After Paige Keeley, after lunch, then there's a group of West 7th grade science teachers, the West Side. They're going to meet in room such and such at DeLand High School. And when you facilitate, and this isn't the part I'm training you about the facilitation of how to break them up into groups, but ultimately, when you ask in the room about standards and what standards would you like to work on, there possibly could be some overlap. Like, oh, those three people are all talking about the same standard, and those four people over there are talking about the same standard, and these five over here are talking about the same standard. So it makes sense to group those two together, and those three together, and those five together, and they'd be grouped by standard. So in this example, we have seventh grade, three seventh grade groups within the seventh grade West group. And that would be group one, group two, and group three in the ERPL Canvas site. So I'm just going to go live really quickly to, I think I am, to an ERPL. And remember that on the home page of each Canvas resource page, there's this incredibly funny picture of Urkel in the ERPL. So whenever you click on that, you get all these. We just populated with more than we needed groups. Hopefully, hopefully there's. So if there was in that West example, there were 3 or 4 groups. You go ahead and assign. Okay, your standard L13-2, whatever. You're going to be group 1, and you 3 over there are going to be group 2, and you're going to be group 3. And then from this point on, they click on the ERPL area, and then they would click on their group. And this is the part where when there's a PowerPoint that guides you through this process, but this is the Padlet. Now, research focus, that's the standard as it's written on the curriculum map. This would be where they type in SC 7. L.13.2 or whatever, and then they would they actually write out the standard and what it says. If you remember in the lesson study days, we would use chart paper, and that standard would be looking at us the whole time that we were working. So we could always go right back to the standard, even though our discussions went a million places, go right back to the standard and figure out what are we trying to teach and not to deviate and go too far down a rabbit hole of something we don't have to teach. So this Padlet on September 1st is going to house the basic things that need to be accomplished that day. You'll see the focus. Research focus is the standard as written, the ones they've selected. So they would do that. I'm going to talk to you about what these other areas are too. Here's a small group norms. You'd probably figure that one out. But what's the research theme? What do I mean by unit goal? So let me go ahead and get to the high school example here. I'm using biology because it's one of the more complicated ones. Rooms, for instance. So in East Biology, that group of people And in other content areas, there's AP classes. So within that same room, there's those teaching like Chem 1 or Bio 1. And then in the same room, maybe they teach Chem 2, teach Bio 2. They teach, I'm talking about two different rooms. I'm going to confuse you. Stick to one room. Here we go. In the East Biology room, in this room, we actually will have Bio 1 teachers. We'll possibly have Bio 2 teachers, AP Biology, and ACE, our new Cambridge course. What same thing can happen. You ask, what standards you like to dive into to learn about, to learn more about and work with other colleagues on this. And in Bio 1, let's say there's a group of people that have matched up standards, and there's 4 little groups that have formed. In Bio 2, it does have its own Canvas site. So this one, they know if they're teaching Bio 2, they know they have their own Canvas resource. In there, they have their own ERPL area too. So they would go and click on that if you have any 2 or more teachers working in Bio 2. But likely there'll be some AP Bio teachers who'd like to get together and work on AP Biology resources and development of a research lesson. And then I already know of the 3 ACE teachers who like to get together, and they'll form a group in themselves. So as the facilitator of the room, your goal would be to assign group numbers. However many groups form, just give them a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and make sure they hear it loud and clear, and somebody clicks in on the ERPL and starts typing in their standard. Because then whenever Mike and I see this on the other side of September 1st, we're going to change the group 1, group 2, group 3 bar, the click that's there. We're going to change it into the standard. So we'll no longer say group 1, group 2. So it'll be important for those groups to remember what standard they're working on. And we want that to be what people see when they click in the ERPL areas, not the group number, but the standard, because it'll be a future resource of what did this group come up with ideas and resources for this standard. So that's the importance of the breaking your large group of teachers down into smaller subgroups, and how they do that by standard, and then you assign them a goal, a group number. Okay, I already showed you that. To facilitate the small group norms, if you follow along all of these things in your facilitator's guide, I'm actually on number 4 now in small group norms, and right here it kind of reminds you the things to say. Now, I've facilitated a group norms activity, I don't know how many times, and each time I've learned something new. And if you leave it wide open-ended, it can take forever. So I've come up with these 4 major things to talk about in the small group norms discussion. So who is this going to be? This is not your large group. This is all the smaller groups in your room now. They are tasked as a small team to develop small group norms. And guess what? Yes, be reported right back on that Padlet when they're finished. So back to the, that's not what I wanted. Back to the Padlet, the small groups norm. It tells them include time, task, tangent, conflict. So it's even got the guiding discussion points there. But here's what I say, and this isn't something you got to memorize. It's right here on your guide. Small group norms have each group spend about 10 minutes on developing their own group norms to be input on the Canvas ERPL group Padlet. The Padlet's that area on the ERPL Canvas site. Time. ERPLs are only 90 minutes long. What will the group agree on to address time? You're looking for, as a facilitator, you're looking to hear them say something like, we will arrive on time and leave on time, or we'll make every effort to get here on time. And I know we're talking ERPLs and people driving, but it's one of those things that just they need to talk it out as a group. And, if someone's arriving late and manage to hit the Dunkin' Donuts and all that on the way, that's something to possibly address as a group. If the group didn't build in their norms, we will loosely arrive on time, making sure we get our Dunkin' Donuts coffee before we get here. it's something to honor the 90 minutes because it's not a lot of time to do this stuff. Task, each ERPL session should be defined. They should define what their group is going to want to accomplish and how will they capture that in a statement as a group norm. There you're looking for they might make a statement about go through a quick agenda in the beginning of each session and maybe end with an agenda. As they finish one ARPL that will lead into another one, they might go, well, next time we'll go over this, and that becomes their beginning agenda next time. These are the types of things that you can coach them through, but you don't want to word it for them, because if you write it for them, then you own it and they don't. So you got to like kind of coach them through this process. The next one's called tangent. This is one of my favorites because it's been the most interesting one out of all of them. All people get off topic, including the facilitator of lesson study. All people get off topic from time to time, and how will the group handle off-topic discussions so they can stay on task at hand? Some groups would make up a word to say to call out when the conversation went off task. So, and I know some of you are watching this and remember that. You made up a word, banana, out of nowhere that would just remind everybody to wait. We're not supposed to be talking about today and what happened in third period, and we're supposed to be doing this right now. We've got to stay on task. So the rule on that is anybody in the group could be called out on you're on a tangent. So that is something that you kind of listen to and help them with. Say, hey, maybe you just have like a code word that's reminding you all to get back on task. And then they would write that as a group norm. And then the last one is conflict. Listen to this one because lots of experience in this. Disagreements happen. It's better to discuss how a group will handle disagreements if they arise. It's best now instead of in the middle of them and then having to backtrack on what it's going to be. What statements will they come up with to make sure everyone has a chance to voice their concern? This is something you shouldn't accept. We will agree to disagree. That's the first thing that is usually said in a group that just wants to get finished with the group norms. And I would hold them to a little bit of a higher standard because that has never worked. Agreeing to disagree doesn't work because they actually don't. They don't agree to disagree. They bury something and it doesn't get dealt with, or something stews and it doesn't create a productive environment of working together. So what I am going to suggest is that you if they say agree to disagree, say, why don't you address the issue or make a statement that ensures that everybody has, like I put it, everyone has a chance to voice their concern, and just kind of leave it at that. And I got a word for word right here that you can use. Come up with something that ensures that everyone will be able to voice their concern, because what has happened in the past is just someone not speaking up, and when they didn't agree with a certain approach, and then it doesn't work or whatever, and they give I knew it wasn't going to work, and why didn't you say something, or it's really important to be able to voice your concern. So time, task, tangent, and conflict, and I said I kind of budgeted like 10 minutes to that, and if it's going over 10 minutes, try to get them to speed it up because there's other things to do on this day. And this would be something they revisit each time. So as time goes on, if they find that these four didn't just these four did not work with their group, they can always add. It's even possible to subtract, but it's just good to have these as a foundation. All right, moving on. This one is an earlier slide within their PowerPoint, but I wanted you to see the other one is much more abbreviated. There is a tasks of the day. You're going to get them to develop a research focus, which is a kind of a code word for select a standard as explained in the curriculum map. So their focus is that standard. The research theme, I'll tell you what that is in a minute. A unit goal, what should be learned before, during, and after a research lesson. What the heck is a research lesson? The research lesson is what they're working together on after they develop these goals. Professional development goal, it's no secret that I've basically really been pushing the to learn more about the BSCS 5E instructional model and how it assists all students to build conceptual understanding about science. So many of us have some understanding of the 5E model. This is a good time for all of us to jump right into the book, into their research, BSCS, and see what each stage of the model truly means. And what are the students doing during this stage? What are the teachers doing during this stage? And how can you purposefully create these moments in the classroom? And the research behind that, the brain research behind it, is for retention. Why would you do this long process? Well, it's for retention. How many of us say, I taught that last year and they don't remember it this year? I knew they went over that last year and they don't remember it this year. It's creating these moments in the classroom. It's called teachable moments for a reason. It actually will help help it stick in their head. And we do these things from time to time. Those are the kids, they come back and they always remember those certain labs and those certain things. It's because we were basically probably doing a complete cycle, learning cycle, whether it be BSCS or something else that you've stumbled across. And these moments were really memorable for the kids. And it's important they remember the science concepts, not just I remember the smell of that burnt peanut when we did the calorimeter. Oh, it smelled. It's learning the science behind that. Okay, research theme. If you need a break before you go into this, just pause because it's been 36 minutes. But come back to this one refreshed so you remember. Okay, so the research theme on your facilitator's guide, it is number 5, and it goes over some of this information right here. PowerPoint slides 16 through 18 on the participant PowerPoint. Here's what you do here. This is lesson study. This is lesson study 101, is setting up the mindset of the group. It might feel a little kumbaya, but I promise you that it's a worthy step because I've done it many, many times, and it gets the group talking about things they don't usually talk about when you get them together. So if you look at the sentence below, research theme, how to be a human, how to be a learner, this actually gets them to think beyond what they normally do. And this is how it builds. It builds like this on the PowerPoint. So you tell all the participants, they're sitting in their smaller groups, okay, I want you all to think about your students. Just think about your students. And they're new, it's September 1st, so they'll be thinking about their current students that they've just started to learn about a little bit. And ask this question of everybody: what qualities would you like these students to have 5 years from now? Right? Just brainstorm some ideas and write down on some piece of paper. Just go ahead and write that down in your group. So you want each person writing something quietly, not necessarily a discussion moment, but have everybody write something down. Give them a few minutes to do that. And then build this in. What are their qualities now? Write that down. So you'll have actual. And so they've gotten to learn their students in the past month or so. And they're going to write down some predictable things that every group has written ever since I've facilitated this process. But what has never happened is they've matched. They've never, ever matched. Thinking about what qualities you'd like your students to have in 5 years versus now. They've never matched. There's always work to do. There's always something the kids can grow in. And that's the basis of this thinking. There's always a gap. So compared to that ideal and the actual, what are the gaps that you'd like to most work on? So when you facilitate this, now you turn it over to the small groups to talk to each other. Say this: share out your lists. What would you want them to do in 5 years from now? And what are their qualities now? What would you like to actually have them work on? Because what that small group's going to have to do is develop a statement in the purple Padlet, and each group should prepare a statement. I'm reading right from the facilitator's guide. Each group should prepare a statement on what they would like to assist students with to research qualities within 5 years. This is the research theme and is to be written on the Canvas purple Padlet. So it's not unusual for a group to be kind of stumped on like what to say, how to say it. Um, so you could show them this if you'd like, because this I think I have this on the participant. Just an example of brainstorm. When you brainstorm with a group, these are some of the things that come about. But more importantly, if they're really stumped, and only if they're really stumped, don't feed this to them. Make them work for this. You can give them this slide, and these are some examples of actual research themes that came about with some lesson study groups. So you can see in the upper left, we want to develop our students' attitudes, curiosity, and motivation towards learning that guides them to the tools necessary to facilitate their future success. Nowhere in there is anything about science. And that's okay, totally okay. Um, but you can see the second bullet point from the left. We will motivate our students to integrate scientific thought and curiosity in everyday application so that students develop a sense of self and their world around them. These came about in that activity. And it didn't take but 5 or 10 minutes to come up with some sort of like deep thought here. But when this is one of those guiding goals in the process, it has you go back to them, and I will be talking to you about next ERPLs, to have them go back to the research theme and read it out loud and think about their unit they're developing and their research lesson they're developing. Are they able to address some of this within that process? Are they giving students, like for instance, upper left hand, are they giving students opportunities to develop a curiosity and a motivation towards learning, to guide them to the tools necessary to facilitate their future success? I mean, like, what within that process are they doing to hit that research theme? So that's one part that's very lesson study unique, but it's really good for the mindset. All right, so back to this one. The research plan on the very bottom there is um, what resources will you use to develop? I'm sorry, let me get to unit goal. Um, the unit goal, there's a visual within the participant slide, and that it looks like this. And what I do is I use this one to show an example of a chemistry group who did lesson study in the past. And what we need to kind of hammer home with them is what they're going to end up doing as a small group is making a lesson together. I would prefer that lesson fit in a 5E unit if they can do that. And this right here is an example of a unit. It isn't necessarily a 5E unit, but this was a unit of instruction. And right here is their research lesson. They actually created a lesson together, and they titled it The Nuts and Bolts of Chemical Reactions. Okay, so what do you need to know before you get to the nuts and bolts of chemical reactions? They decided that this area over here was the prior knowledge and the things that they needed to know before they got to this particular lesson. But where does it lead to? And they decided it leads to understanding of the limiting reactants. And the questions raised during this unit of study are all here on the right-hand side. And this is just an example, but it's the kind of thinking that needs to happen. Um, sorry, the thinking that needs to happen whenever when they develop their lesson. Sometimes it's an introductory lesson, so it isn't as much. There isn't as much preceding, but there's definitely some prior knowledge that is almost always needed before you get into the science. And then, more importantly, if it's a beginning lesson, if it's a beginning of a unit or beginning of instruction, then there's most likely opportunity to see where does this lead to. And this is the last slide after the unit, and it's just a little funny thing, but it's true. If you don't know where you're going, any road will get you there. All right. So that's 44 minutes, and this is kind of the overview. But again, let me reiterate that you are going to be facilitating after the Paige Keeley session. You only have 2.5 hours to make sure that they develop make sure they identify a standard, that they'll break up into smaller subgroups in the room. They will develop small group norms in their little subgroups, and then they will also develop a research theme. and the research theme, and all this goes on the Padlet. And on the Padlet is the area of collaboration I meant to show you. So their unit goal, the very last thing I said, they would be starting to type what should precede this information in the standard here. They would write their research theme that they developed together. And right here, professional learning goal, the BSCS 5E instructional model, is right there. There's nothing really they have to do. But if they decided they also would like to, we also want to look up some Kagan strategies. Okay, nothing wrong with it. Just don't want to overwhelm them, but it's their decision. The reason why I have professional learning BSCS, I'm going to actually be providing materials and some materials and supplies to each group, so they don't have to, dive into it. But down here, facilitators, this is an area where you click reply, and this, oops, I didn't mean to italicize, but down here is where they would start their collaboration. So they might be taking notes about this session. They might, there's no need to put up group norms in here or the research theme in this area, but this would be the area where they develop their research plan. So that is the goal of September 1st, is doing all these things and start talking about a research plan. So let me switch over to the participants PowerPoint. This is the one that you can use like as is. You may want to add some of the slides that I've provided. I don't know where to put me. You may want to put some the slides that I provided, especially with some of the background and lesson study. But it's going to lengthen the process. I just wanted you as a facilitator to understand why I selected lesson study process to do this, because then it becomes kind of an autopilot, and each purple you're walking around the room to see and make sure the groups are moving forward. And if they're in a stumbling block that you can't seem to help them with, the beauty of the ERPLs being regional and on certain days is myself, Mike, we'll have Amy and Louise will be at the school as well, and you can call me in if you have like a process question, if there's some content or resource ideas needed. Any one of us could be assisting in the room. So that's just the nice thing about it, is you're not left alone as the facilitator room to know everything and have every answer. We're going to be there to help you, and if I don't know the answer, we'll figure out a way to help you. Okay, so here, imagine this is your slide, and you might customize it with the group that you are right here with September 1, and like say your East 7th grade or whatever. This is really this. Sorry, hang on, let me do this. This sheet that was also attached to your Canvas. The Facilitator's Guide to Secondary Science. This is what will walk you right along what slides are used during this, and it gives you talking points. So worst case scenario, if you don't remember the video and the details I'm saying here, then you can just definitely go across. So the beginning is a welcome and overview. Oops, sorry. The beginning is welcome overview, present large group norms and outcomes. So that's PowerPoint slides 1 through 5. So here's one. Here's what we're going to be doing today. And if you don't understand everything, well, don't worry, I'm going to walk us through it. But we're going to select a research focus. We're going to develop a research theme. We're going to identify unit goals. Want to make sure we acknowledge that the professional development goal is to learn more about the BSCS 5E instructional model. And ultimately, we're going to develop a research plan for something called a research lesson. So what's the research lesson? That's ultimately, we're going to be writing a lesson together in our small groups. But remember, they're not in their small groups yet. They're in the big group. We haven't facilitated anything yet to get them in a small group. This is the overview of the ERPLs, and I added this. Now, this might not come out very well on your computer, but I don't know how well it'll come out on the PowerPoints or the screens that we're getting. But whatever session you are facilitating on September 1st, this is the list of the future regional ERPLs. So if you happen to be, say, East Side Chemistry, you you may want to take this slide and do something here to make sure that they east side chemistry um, clicks on 81400. I'm sorry, goes into my PGS. You can do a section search at 81400 and click on it, or they can just search by course and it will list all the sections under the course. And there's a few groups like physics, anatomy, physiology, and marine science. They're just so small that they are meeting as one group, no matter whether they're east or west. And they provided me their dates, but their unique sections are down there. So anyways, this is just something if you want to customize it somehow and just provide your group their ERPL section, you need to make sure that they're registering for their ERPLs. As of right now, they're not all registering for September 1, so it's not the end of the world, but it would be nice to know numbers because if I have too small of a room, I won't know unless they sign up. So that's really important. Okay, so there's that continuous improvement cycle. You don't have to go deep into this just to know that we are in a process that's going to be cyclical. So like as you begin this process, it's possible to run through the course. And when they run through the course, it means they've written a standard, they've identified their standards or research goals, and they've developed a unit of instruction, maybe in a research lesson. The group could then agree that we're going to teach it during the week of blank, and they will then maybe debrief at the next ERPL, maybe bring in some student samples of some work that they did. That's the stuff that you want to encourage. The other thing is there's a few groups that might take this in a different direction. Like they have other ideas and I'm very open to ideas. Like if a group feels like they want to dive into something and spend the time together researching and developing, and they're not exactly going to meet the Jeremy Blinn request of diving into 5E and producing some sort of a lesson that they can teach in their own respective classrooms and come back and deliberate about, but they have another idea, I'm open to it because I want it to be meaningful to the participants. That's first and foremost the idea that it is something they value. So I know this process can be valued because I've done it many times, but there's other ways that you can value this process of collaboration with each other. I think of physics, for example, who has this whole process to go through common misconceptions in physics, and they've already kind of planned out what they're going to do. And I'm absolutely open to that. And I also know that they're willing to try to give the application of the 5E instructional model a go, but they're also so planned out with this misconceptions, and they work together yearly like this, so this isn't a new thing for them. I'm just kind of giving them more opportunity with the ERPLs now, the RPLs that is. But anyway, just want you to know, as a facilitator, if you're starting to hear them and you think they're going rogue, and just let me know, and it's gonna probably be like thumbs up, go for it if it means something to them. It's just when they start talking about homecoming dance and what they're planning with student government and all these, if there's other things going on, what they're planning at this competition or that competition, and it's not about this, then that's kind of the stuff we need to get back on topic. Large group norms is when you inform them of the large group norms. It isn't something that we create together. It's just asking them to be totally present. What is lesson study like? And oh yeah, I did include this in here, but this is optional. I put in here on activity number 2, why is lesson study process, why the lesson study like process, and it's an optional one. So if you don't want to dive into this because you're not comfortable with it, feel free to skip over these or just delete the slides or hide them. Number 3 on here is research focus. It gives you the information on here to present. The research focus is what science standard you would like to devote much time and effort in researching. The standard is selected is often a standard that students traditionally have difficult learning. If you have any teachers in the room who've taught for any number of years, there's always some that stick in their mind. Now the key thing in here is there's this kind of sweet spot in the curriculum map that would make sense. If you pick a standard that's like tomorrow, you're not going to get time to work with your group and then apply it. I mean, it's possible that you work on a standard that you've already taught, and then you'll have to wait till next year when you teach it again to see if it's um, worthy, or if you're in middle school and it's something you could review before um, the test in 8th grade, something like that. But the sweet spot I'm determining, give or take a few weeks, depending on your regional ERPLs, but from weeks 14 to 22, if you look in your curriculum maps, have them, and it says it right here, you don't have to memorize this in there, have them look for a standard that would be difficult for students to learn traditionally. So this is where you debrief with the room participants and see if they share some ideas, form groups around the desire to work around a common standard. That's where you subdivide the room into common standards. And when you go from weeks 14 to 22, it's not a huge list of standards in most curriculum maps. So there'll probably be a fair chance that some people will, there'll be some overlapping ideas. Okay, then this slide, this is the screenshot, unless you want to go live into Canvas and show them. So on your EPLC Canvas site, you might remember seeing this ERPL. We're going to now click on the ERPL ERPL area, and then it looks like this. No matter what content area you are, we have East and West groups. So depending on what room you're in, if you're an East or a West group, you can assign them the appropriate group number via East or the West, and then have them working in that area from this point on in the day. So then they will see that there's a Padlet that we will be working on today and populating with information, and that's where we'll talk to you about what the research theme is. But right now, you can put in your research focus, because the research focus is that standard that your small group has selected. So in your curriculum map, and if you didn't bring your curriculum map, of course, on this Canvas site, there's a link to the curriculum map that you write down word for word what that standard says, no matter how long it is. Just write it in on there, because you need to have the complete standard written there so that you keep revisiting that at each ERPL. And this will be a place where you suggest that, in your group, it would be good to have a timekeeper, maybe go from the bottom up. A timekeeper to make sure when we finish state the time here for your middle school times or your high school times at the end in this day, it's 3 o'clock. But for the future at ERPLs, the middle school ends at a certain time, the high school ends at a certain time. Don't have it off the top of my head. Or here, okay, wait. High school ends at 4 o'clock and middle school ends at 4:50. So that person could be kind of the timekeeper, know when their time is finishing. Recorder, one official person on the ERPL area to record what's going on. But everyone should make sure know that they have the rights and should contribute to that area that's on the discussion area. Not the Padlet necessarily, but under the discussion area where they can contribute. The note taker, that's the everyone, whether they be officially on the discussion area of the ERPL or just something off to the side. And then facilitator, that your room facilitator, each small group should have someone kind of taking lead on always keeping the students' eyes, the student lens in mind. And that would be a really, really important to always kind of, well, so how will the students react to, what will the students think about this? Say students a lot. Say it a lot. And then you can't forget that we're trying to think like a student and see this like a student. Here's the small group activity. Again, the notes are right here. This is the research theme activity. Like I told you, it does a build effect. So again, the notes are right here. Think about your students' qualities now. I'm sorry, 5 years from now, the actual what they are now. There's a gap. Have them walk through this, and once they've developed their own research theme, put that on the Padlet, of course. And here's an example brainstorm. I kept it on. You click right through that really quickly, or just see. This was just an example of another science group in the past. Did you have anything similar? Here's the examples of the ones that if they're stumbling, they're it's end of the day, and they're tired and they can't think of anything. You can give them a little lifeline here to help them out. Here's the unit planning discussion. And unit goal, I'm on 6 now of this document, and it says the groups in the room will be developing a unit of instruction that includes their research focus standard. The placement of this lesson they developed to teach the standard needs to be identified with the following questions. What should be learned before, during, and after? So it's basically what it says right there, and then this is blown up so that they can see it a little bit bigger. An example chemistry one. This is the resources that I will have. I'm hoping by September 1 that there's, well, we'll have enough of these at DeLand High. I probably won't be able to deliver these to all the rooms. So as a facilitator, here's your kind of little prescription. You could send somebody to, I don't know where yet. We'll have like a resource table set up somewhere, and I guess keep your ears open for like an email saying we're going to set up a resource table that will have the 5e books and the teaching for conceptual understanding in science books at the table, chart paper and markers and things like that at the table. You could send somebody to the table to pick up some supplies. If you have these books would be one of each books for each group, and I'm hoping I have enough. This is completely a like a guesstimate. So the earlier you have when you have your group selected, you know how many they're in there, you can send somebody to the table to ask for, we have 5 groups in our room, get 5 books of each, and then one per group. So one of these per group, and then we need to make sure these books end up at every ERPL. So I do not want you as a facilitator to have that burden of lugging the 5 books, but we need to ensure that they're at each one. So each group, small subgroup, is relying on somebody to bring it. And if that person's sick and they're without the resource, that'll be a bummer. But we're going to provide some kind of like pages to note at in the future to look at the certain like good kind of gems of wisdom within the book. The whole thing's darn good, each one of them. But they don't have time, and who has the time to go through the whole thing? So we will provide them some of the key points to assist and develop more understanding of the BSCS 5e instructional model. And this other book, with Teaching Conceptual Understanding, a really good book, and it has lots of little gems of wisdom also in there, and I think each teacher could get something from that. So this is the divide and conquer of research plan. So what is a research plan? This is really what will drive them for the next 4 ERPLs. If you get to this point before the end of your September 1st day, you're in a good place. If you get them to slides 10, 11 through 14, then you're going to, hang on a second, pause. Okay. So if you get to this point, like I said, this is going to be a great place to be in. On the, on the very back, number 8 on the document, it's the kind of the guidance behind this. So when they get to this point, what does this mean? And it's important to go, well, it isn't just about the science standard that they've selected to dive into and figure out best whether best teaching practices or something about it. It's also, like it says in here, some time to talk about classroom management strategies, technology, use of models and videos. If they dive into the 5e instructional model, they'll realize that each one of those stages would kind of need a certain type of instructional delivery. And so that's where like the basis of research could be. So if you got a standard that would be embedded within a 5e instructional unit, and some of these standards are units in themselves. So you might not have to dive too deep to include other standards, but how would you teach this particular standard in the idea of using 5e? what would be your engage, and what would you offer students to explore new content, um, and get exposed to new vocabulary that, remember, you haven't yet necessarily defined for them or made them, but they get into an opportunity to explore and experience the new vocabulary before they define it. So it's that activity before content, and content before ABC, CBV, CBV, content before vocabulary. That's it. It's the end of the day. You might not know this, but I'm tired. And so that, and yeah, that's the last slide. So this is the participant one, and I'm right at an hour. So realizing that this, I want you to realize that this hour that you have stayed watching this, this is part of your planning, and this would be part of your stipend. And I'm going to round this up to 1.5 hours because I'm sure there'll be some thinking and email, like or questions in the Canvas link that you have. There's an area for discussion. I'll monitor this the best I can, but really the best opportunity to get some live back and forth discussion about this September 1st training is next Wednesday, August 30th. Yeah, August 30th. I have I have the room at Brewster Center reserved for anyone who'd like to come for face-to-face discussion, because I know sometimes it's just better to sit and talk. By that time, I will figure out a method to webinar that. So you can kind of be an eavesdropper in the face-to-face. It might be like two of us sitting in there, but I will, I'm not sure if Adobe Connect's still a thing, but if I can use Skype, but I will provide you all a link to jump in on for any discussion. Now that's August 30th, which is just a few days before September 1st. It will be important to get your questions answered. If you have any uncomfort levels by, on that day, because preceding that, I've purposely created this day in that moment for it. And like I said, I will try to monitor the Canvas discussion if you throw questions on there, but for the next several days, I don't have a lot of time to watch and sit and answer an excessive amount of emails about this. So that's why I've designated time to do this. August 30th, Wednesday, from 4 to 5:30 at Brewster Center. That's the face-to-face part. During that same time, I will log in somehow a webinar, so you can listen in the best you can. And if Adobe Connect's still a thing, we'll have a chat room going, and I'll have Mike monitor the chat if you have questions. But that's how we're going to do it. Now, here is another thing. For September 1st, if you find yourself in need of me to come into the room and assist with something, keep in mind that I will be on a kind of a quick pace with Paige Keeley herself to visit each room. It doesn't mean I could have someone else kind of going around each room, but if there's some reason you need me during that day and I've already visited your room or haven't been there yet, you could give me a call on my cell number. It's 386-216-5405. You can give me a text. Call would be fine, but give me a text and let me know, because if I don't have your number in my phone, just let me know who you are, what room you're in, and you don't have to give me just say, if can you come by for a question or a comment or something. Just use that sparingly on that day, because again, I will make it to your room eventually with Paige Keeley, but I can understand there might be situations where you need somebody right then, and that's how I'll treat it if I get a text from you or a call. It's been a little over an hour, and I do appreciate your time to watch this. And again, the two PowerPoints, one was for you as a facilitator. This one that I've just gone over is for you to use on September 1st. And again, feel free to import any of those slides from the other one into here if you feel like you want to use it. And I think that's it. So 1 minute and 10 seconds, and I'm out. Have a great day, night, morning, and I will see you soon.